series, we talk to successful entrepreneurs who have conquered immeasurable obstacles to live the life of their dreams. These are the Rockstar Entrepreneurs. David Chilton is a Canadian businessman and entrepreneur, best known for his financial planning book, The Wealthy Barber. Early in life, David postponed his university education to pursue prospective business ventures. After gaining valuable investing experience, he spent 26 months writing The Wealthy Barber, one of the best-selling Canadian books of all time. Taking his success to the publishing industry, David has collaborated with authors Greta and Janet Podleski to sell many bestsellers such as Looneyspoons and Eat, Shrink, and Be Merry. In response to the financial disaster of 2008, Chilton released a sequel entitled The Wealthy Barber Returns. Till this day, he runs his own financial planning and publishing company. David Chilton was also a dragon on Dragon's Den for 3 seasons. Welcome to the Rockstar Entrepreneur Series here at the beautiful Trump International Hotel and Tower in downtown Toronto. And joining us now is Rockstar Entrepreneur David Chilton. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Pretty fancy digs. Very impressive.
Thank you. Now, you knew you wanted to become an entrepreneur at an early age. As a teenager, you would hunt for used golf balls and resell them. You also sold car detailing door to door. What did that whole experience teach you about life and money?
Well, the latter experience, the door-to-door sales, is a great way to start. I mean, you get rejected a tremendous amount, sometimes rudely, frankly.
I can imagine.
And so you become accustomed to dealing with all of that. I like the sales end. The product was very good. It's a lot easier to sell a good product than a bad one, obviously. So I think that was a great way to start out. But it also, the whole commission thing intrigued me. And the unlimited upside compared to hourly pay that my friends were obviously involved in with conventional summer jobs. So it whetted my appetite. But you're right, I wanted to be an entrepreneur right out of the gate. I don't think anybody would hire me, truthfully. So thankfully, I did want to be an entrepreneur, and I went that route out of university and more or less have stuck with it the entire time.
Yeah, and your dad was the principal of a school, and he emphasized the importance of being nice over just getting good grades.
He still does. Yeah, he's
Sure.
still around, and that's big. It's still his big theme is how important it is to treat people kindly and respectfully and to do your best at everything. And I've had great parents. I've been very lucky in my life. You know, I've had remarkable health. I was so fortunate with The Wealthy Barber. I've really only had one good idea, but I had it when I was young, and so it paved the way for all the other opportunities. And then I've had great parents, and you don't choose your parents. So I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, and how do you think that lesson has contributed to your success in business and just generally in life?
Well, I really did try to follow his teachings of being pleasant and being nice and being positive at all times, and I think that I've also tried to be the same person. So whether I'm on the Dragon's Den set, or in an interview, or at home, or out in the public, I'm always the same. And I think people come to expect that, even on the printed page or on the stage, it's the same guy at all times. So the nice thing is I don't have to worry about a brand or an image or anything. I'm always the exact same fellow. It's made it a lot easier.
Yeah. Now, obviously, let's talk about your book, The Wealthy Barber. How did you come up with this concept?
You know, it's interesting. When I was very young, 21, 22, I became a stockbroker. And I would give financial planning books out to customers. They hated them. They thought they were dry and boring and intimidating, and I think I could do better. So I started working on one idea called The Ultimate Guide to Losing Money, and it was a humorous look at the mistakes people make with their money. And then I was watching Cheers one night, and I got the idea, I should fictionalize this, put it in a story format. That'll make it more fun, more accessible. And I called it The Wealthy Bartender initially. But then as the book played out, everybody got drunk and they were picking up prostitutes. It all really fell apart. So I moved it over to the barber shop. But honestly, I thought the book would sell a few thousand copies. I never, ever envisioned it becoming what it did. So it's exciting.
And what's interesting about you is you self-published your own book. You read other books on how to do it and you studied the business. So talk to us about that experience.
Well, that's one of my favorite questions because it's one of the things I really push at young people is to read. There's so many great books and great websites out there and bloggers who've been through the wars before, and you can draw down from their experiences. And with self-publishing, I read the 4 or 5 big books, learned as much as I could, learned everything I could about doing your own publicity, and set out. And a lot of people have assumed that it was because I couldn't get the book published, but that's not the case. The only publisher I took it to wanted it, but they wouldn't give me the special sales arena, the corporate sales. And I knew that they weren't good at it, so I wasn't comfortable letting them have that license in essence, and so I decided to self-publish. And you know, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but that was the best judgment call because it made me learn a lot about everything from accounting to marketing to PR to doing interviews. You're forced into it. And of course, the better the book did, the more opportunities ended up coming down the pipe. And so the whole thing was a dream experience, you know, it really was.
I know I mentioned this earlier, but what's one major obstacle that you faced in your life? Something that really was a major milestone for you?
I think the biggest one by far in my case was when I first started working the Wealthy Barber, and I'm 5 months into it full time. I've got no other revenue stream. I've really dedicated myself to this. I sent out the manuscript, first 4 chapters, to 3 experts in the personal finance field. None of them liked it. And you know, that's a long time ago, 27 years ago. I can remember where I was when I answered the phone with their feedback. It was so etched in my mind because it's pretty emotional to put that much time into something and then have it go over poorly. And thank heavens I persevered, and I've told this story many times, but the luckiest break of my life was I was just about to give up based on that feedback, and instead I took the same sample chapters and gave them to the target audience, in this case 12 guys on my slow pitch team, and they all loved it. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot of valuable lessons there. One of them, never give up, but maybe as importantly, be careful about listening to experts, because they have a very much a preconceived notion of what will work based on their own experiences, and sometimes they're 2, 3, 4 steps removed from the front line, from the target audience. So for them, getting the teachings in a novel format didn't work because they already had that knowledge. But for the average person out there who didn't have that background, didn't like math, having the story wrapped around it was very important. So the biggest obstacle was regaining my confidence there and having the kind of conviction to carry on, because again, you're revenueless. You're taking a huge risk here. I'd walked away from a good job when I was young to get it all going. So I think that's the one. And the other thing is that kind of business, it's isolating. You're on your own, literally. You know, you're working out of your house all day by yourself. I mentioned earlier my family was involved in the evenings, but you really are on your own. You've got to find funding, obviously. In fact, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I've said it before. I actually cashed out my RSP to print The Wealthy Barber. The whole book says never touch your RSP, and I actually touched my RSP to put it together, but I viewed it as an investment. So I wasn't taking the RSP on spending it. I was investing in myself and in the book, and fortunately it all worked out quite well.
Yeah, and what pushed you to persevere in those times that you weren't making money and you weren't getting deals and stuff like that at that time? What pushed you forward? Well,
it's interesting you asked that. I do think that relatively quickly after the negative feedback, I got the positive feedback from the guys in the team, and that reinvigorated me. But I think more than that, it's an advantage of being young. I didn't have as much to risk.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I've got years to make up for this if it doesn't go well. And I think a lot of people should start being an entrepreneur when they're very young. And a lot of parents are guarded and say, no, establish yourself first in the conventional corporate community, then branch out. But oftentimes they don't, because they get locked into that lifestyle. They get a guaranteed income, they've got a mortgage and everything else. They can't break away. I think starting right out of school is often a good move. So because if I failed, it wasn't going to be devastating. I didn't have a lot to lose. I think that helped a little bit to kind of push on.
And last but not least, if you could look into the camera, and inspire one person or a young entrepreneur, as you mentioned, that is just, wants to give up, is at the end of the road, what would you say to them personally?
Well, I think the advice I would give goes back to how we started the interview, and that is that there's tremendous amounts of information out there. And I've seen young kids come up with brilliant business ideas in the last 5 and 10 years, but what separated the successes from the not so successful has been their learning ability. They're constantly reading and taking other people's ideas and massaging them or matching them or lateral thinking, mixing them. All those things have been huge. There's a young guy in Waterloo, did an unbelievable job selling basketball training videos. This is one of the most successful launches I've ever seen. Well, you go over and see his office, he's got stacks of books on internet marketing, digital marketing. And that was his formal education. He read everything, and some of the stuff I'm sure he thought was garbage, but lots of the other stuff sunk in. I've got my own kids doing the same thing. They're always reading now, trying to learn, and it just gets you thinking at all times. So I think combining a lot of research, reading, with, again, you've got to have a bias to action. And those two things are key to match up, because a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs on the surface don't really have that desire to go out and get the grit, because that's the one thing you have to have. I mean, as much as I often disagree with Kevin O'Leary, he's right about that. There's a lot of crap that happens in business. Every day you've got to be willing to grind it out. And I mean, grit's probably the single most important quality for the successful entrepreneur.
The Rockstar Entrepreneur Series is in partnership with Trump Toronto.